going on, Breaking Brown family? As usual, this is Yvette Carnell coming to you. Breaking Brown, this is what we do. This is what we do every Monday and Wednesday. I wasn't here on Monday because I was doing something. I was doing something that I think is important. And it's something that has to do with the show that I'm about to do, because we have to have a lesson, we have to talk, we have to teach. What's going on, family? We have to talk about propaganda, and we have to talk about solutions. We have to talk about solutions that people don't think are solutions because they don't want to work as hard as we're willing to work here at the Breaking Brown family. So it's 9:25, so most of you should have had time to get your libations. If you not have had time to do that, go do that right now. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please like if you haven't liked already. Let me see. Woo. Okay. Please, the newsletter is $2 a month. You can go and get that at breakingbrown.com. Please share in your groups. And look, it's my shirt. It's Valentine's Day. So if don't nobody else love you, or don't nobody else act like they love you, because love is a verb. If you got a lot of people around you acting like saying they love you, a lot of people are one person and they don't love you, the Breaking Brown family loves you. I love you. This is what we do here. We are a community. We are a growing community. We're not just people talking or whatever. We're doing things here. We're building a political foundation. We're building political education. That's what we do here. So I want to get to it, because I know a lot of y'all got to get up and you got to go to work, and you're like, Yvette, you be taking all night. I'm going to get to it. For those of you who don't know, let me bring this up. Last week, Antonio Moore and I went to, we spend a lot of time working with, and before I put that up, let me put this up. We work with a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal pastor in Louisville, and his name is Dr. Kevin Cosby. If you haven't caught him preach, you can go to my page, go back about 2 or 3 days to Sunday. You can hear me in the Amen corner with him preaching, about black liberation. And like I said then, if your pastor is not preaching about black liberation, if he is not connecting biblical principles to the liberation of black people in America, then I don't know what you're doing at church on Sunday morning. If he is not connecting what you are going through and telling you what we need to do and what you need to do in order to remove ourselves from this space, I don't know what you're doing at church. I don't even know what you tithing for. If it does not include your own liberation as a community, as a people, I don't know what you're doing. So with Dr. Kevin Cosby, Antonio Moore and I are working on something called the Angela Project. And it's a multi-denominational, it's multiracial, and people are coming in, and we're talking about reparations, and we're having the conversations, reading the books, and getting people to a point where they can understand what happened, because you have to understand what happened in order to understand what needs to happen. So that's Antonio Moore and I with the author of the book, Mr. Rothstein. And he gave a good presentation where we talked about what we talked about on this show, right? We talked about this book before I went there, and we had a very good conversation on this show on Breaking Brown Live about the specifics of what government did, how government ensured that America was segregated, and how it ensured that black people got less. That black people got moved into areas that became slums. They got zoned for liquor stores and plants that poisoned us and all of that sorts of thing. So we saw how that happened, and what the conversation that we had on this show was about how that was made possible by the government. And it was a conversation about de facto segregation, which is just people choose not to be around black people. Some businesses do it or whatever. And that's de facto, and de jure segregation. De facto versus de jure. De jure means the government did it. And if the government did it, the government ought to fix it. De facto is, well, you know, some people just might not want, and black people want to be around black people. And two very different things, right? So, very good. For those of you who don't know, it was a very good time. Never seen a white man sing the black national anthem, especially the way he do it. Never saw a bunch of white people stand up for the black national anthem. It was a beautiful thing. What wasn't as beautiful, ladies and gentlemen, what was not as beautiful is the way it was covered by the media. Now, we talked about what happened, and we talked about how the government did it. How the government, for those of you who weren't here when I spoke about it, the government wouldn't even insure. The FHA wouldn't even insure. If you were going to a mortgage for a black person, it didn't even matter your credit or whatever, all that. Well, get your credit up. Black people who were doing everything right, middle class, couldn't get a mortgage. And then in the communities, they said, well, you can't get a, they wrote it into the deed. You can't sell this to black people. And then one dude who tried to do it, a white guy who tried to even sublet to a black person, said, we will never, ever, 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 ever give you another FHA loan because you tried to be good to a black person. So what the government did was not only segregate our communities. The government said, if you try to be a good white person, we're gonna punish you. We're gonna punish you for being a good white person. You couldn't even really be a good white person without having the weight of the government fall down on you. Okay, so let me tell you what happened. So I'm looking, good friend of the show, Matt, if you're watching, we appreciate you. Good friend of the show, he brought something to my attention. And what I want to say is that if you read the subtitle of, let me put up this right. This is the book that in case you weren't here last week, this is the book that we're talking about. Let me just, this is the Color of Law. And if you see that subtitle at the bottom, it says a forgotten history of how government segregated America. Let me say that one more time. A forgotten history of how government segregated America. Now, what this book is telling you is that government did this. This isn't something that just happened. This isn't a group of people that just like to live. Oh, black people just like to live around. No, this is something that government did. It's very, very, very specific. It's very, very, very specific. It's not anything that anybody's making up. It's a very, very, very specific in terms of what happened. In terms of how all of this happened. Now let me put up another quote from the book. Just so we're all very clear on what happened. It says, without our government's purposeful imposition of racial segregation, the other causes, private prejudice, white flight, real estate steering, bank redlining, income differences, and self-segregation still would have existed, but with far less opportunities for expression. Segregation by intentional government action is not de facto, rather it is what the courts call de jure, segregation by law and public policy. Segregation, ladies and gentlemen, by law and public policy. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, segregation by law and public policy. What that means and what you should feel in your bones is that this is something that did not just happen to us. This is something that government did to us. Once again, this is not something that happened to us. This is something that government did to us. Government took away our ability to be American. It is not just our ability to be it is not just our ability to move. And I want to and have wealth. It's our ability to be American in the richest country in the world. Let me put this up. Now, if for those of you, if you see this right now, please, this is WAVE Channel 3. I want you to pull this article up for me. Community holds conversation, and Antonio Moore and I were at this about racism, segregation. Pull this up. I'm going to give you a minute to pull this up for me. And I want you to think about what I just said about what the community, about what the book was about, The Color of Law. I want you to think about what I just said about, even if you haven't read it, think about what I just said it was about. The government did this. Things just happen, isn't in the Constitution. And that's what we are. I want you to think about that. Now I want you to go to this article. Now, I'm going to read from this article, and I want you to juxtapose what I just said to what I'm reading from this article. It says Rothstein's book attempts. I think they've already changed it. I think she changed the article already, which is great. And let me tell you why it's great. What initially was said in the article was that the article initially said that FHA tried to stop this sort of discrimination and that this was de facto segregation. So the article was initially very, very, very wrong. The article initially did not make sense. The article initially was a problem. And when I see things that are problems, I try to deal with those problems in kind. So I tweeted the reporter from WAV3 and I said, listen, this is just wrong. This doesn't make any sense. I said, what you just said, what you just wrote was the opposite of what was in the book. You wrote something that was not what the book talked about de jure segregation and the government causing this, and you went and said it was de facto segregation. Not only that, I told the reporter, go and check my Twitter timeline at Breaking Brown. I said you also brought something else into the conversation in terms of saying that FHA tried to stop it, which was not true. The reporter then replied with the following. Thank you for your insight. I will be honest and say I was not able to read the book in its entirety before writing the story. I did what I could off of sound bites provided to me. I will make sure the story is updated as soon as possible. I will make sure the story is updated as soon as possible. This is a black reporter, right? I think she went somewhere in Florida. I don't know if it was Florida A&M, FAMU. I can't remember off the top of my head. But one of the things, like when I'm talking about this, one of the things that we have to make sure of, this reporter, and I'm not slamming her, I appreciate her being honest and updating that story. I appreciate that. And I want her to know, if you're watching this right now, I appreciate that. I appreciate you. But one of the things that we have to understand is that people who benefited from affirmative action, like this reporter, people who benefited and walked on the shoulders and continue to walk on the shoulders of people who died and bled, you have to do your work. And the thing is, if people don't do their work, it's up on us to do their work for them. That's why we're here. See, people always ask me for solutions, but part of the solution is doing this kind of work. You have to be very careful in terms of the kind of media that you watch. And when you watch media and you know that stuff is wrong, you have to hold people accountable. Now, first of all, you have to know that it's wrong. And if you don't know enough about politics, if you don't know enough about your history, you don't know that it's wrong. So there's not anything that you can really do. Let me tell you something. One of the things, I hear a lot of black entrepreneurs and stuff try to talk about, we just got to be just like Jewish people. That's all we got to do. And most of the time they're wrong and they're ahistorical and they don't understand anything. But the one thing that I will say that the Jewish community should be lauded on is that they protect their story, regardless. They protect their story over everything. They protect that story. When you go, I think there's a movie out now called The Defiant Ones or something like that. It's another Nazi story. It's another story about, I think they protect members of the Jewish community who are hiding from the Nazis, something like that. They tell that story from every angle, and they know their story, and they protect that story. Now, this ain't going to get you $1 million. But you have to, if you want to get to a place where you can be competitive and do your stuff, you cannot do that without knowing your story, owning your story, and being able to push in the direction when somebody tells part of your story and it's not right, that's your responsibility in your community. Now, this just happened. This person was good enough to say, Yvette, you're right. I only heard the sound bites. I'm going to go back and I'm going to correct it and I'm going to make it right. That happened within the span of like 15 minutes. Matt put it on my Facebook. I tweeted her in like 15, 20 minutes. She said, you know what? You're right. My question to a lot of you is, why aren't you doing that in your own community? When they get your story wrong, you can't just say, well, you know what, that's what people do, and that's just how the news be sometime, and I'm just going to buy some Bitcoin. You cannot be in this space and let people get your story wrong, because when you get my story wrong, what you're basically doing is promoting propaganda. Because when you let people get your story wrong, then they can misconstrue your story. And then what you have is not the truth. You just have propaganda. And that's how propaganda gets legs. Propaganda gets legs when you don't know your story and you cannot effectively communicate your story. What do you mean, Yvette? What do you mean? All they have to do is muddy the water. Because in the original story, it made it sound like what Rothstein was talking about was just a theory. It wasn't the truth, and the government tried this a theory. That's not something that you want to act upon. The Holocaust is very clear. Genocide against Jews, clear. Victim, perpetrator, clear. You cannot allow for any muddying of the water. You cannot allow for that at all. You have to have a purpose. It's just like a movie. You ever watch a movie? And you're real clear on who is the perpetrator, who is the villain, any kind of superhero movie. And I know a lot of y'all want to talk about, I know in the newsletter we had a lot of Black Panther articles. I'm going to get to that, but I'm not going to get to that till Monday. A very, very special after the movie comes out and y'all have had the opportunity to see it. We're going to dissect that. But have you ever watched a movie that doesn't have that doesn't have a clear villain, that doesn't have a clear hero? You never have a hero story without a clear hero and a clear villain. You have a hero's tale. The hero has an origin story, and everybody's very clear. That's what has to happen for us. And also, the original, let me just say this. There's something else we have to talk about. The mayor, it wasn't just the reporter. And this is the book. If you haven't gotten the book, I'm just going to put this up big. If you haven't gotten this book, you got to get this book. You got to get The Color of Law. You got to get it. If you haven't gotten it, I don't know what you're waiting on. I don't know what you think going to happen, but you got to get it. But one of the things that I also want to, that I have to kind of make clear is how, and I don't know what else to call it, but and I've called it this all the time, but our justice claim is kind of usurped, for lack of a better word, by not only other communities, other people, but it's usurped by the language that we use in order to push for that justice claim. So what we have here, this is the mayor of Louisville. Because part of this, like this book is so, if you read this book, it's Louisville. Like one of the seminal cases involves Louisville, Kentucky. That's what Dr. Cosby is. That's what St. Stephen's Church is. That's your mayor now. That's the mayor of Louisville. And he comes into this event. We're having this event and we're talking about a justice claim. We're talking about what happened to African Americans and how African Americans were the only group who was shut out in this fashion over centuries. We're having that discussion. And he comes in and he basically says, we love everybody. And we're different now. And we're going to change things now. And we got a new program called Lean In. We're going to deal with xenophobia. What? How many Mexicans you got in Louisville? I ain't seen one Mexican when I was there. I'm not saying they not there at all, but I ain't seen. But you're gonna deal with xenophobia and all the ways that we don't like any kind of non-white people, and that's how we gonna deal with what happened to. See, we're gonna deal with everybody based on what happened to a specific group of African Americans. That's like saying we're going to give everything to everybody based on one thing that happened to Holocaust victims. Do you know what Holocaust victims would say if you said that? And rightfully so. If you said we just going to give money to everybody who has been victimized, if Germany had said we're going to give money to the Native Americans over here and this group over here, we're going to give money to everybody on behalf of a victimized group. That's what he basically said. We got a little lead-in group. We're going to take care of everybody and be nice to everybody on behalf of a group that was specifically disenfranchised and specifically marginalized and specifically shut out of what it means to be American, and is specifically on the bottom right now in terms of income. That is what this mayor said to the black people of Louisville. And what we have to say is that no, you are absolutely wrong in terms of this has to be specific. We have to have an advantage. This is not about us just having something or us having equality. We bypassed equality a long time ago, brothers and sisters. This is about us needing an advantage. Because if you look at what we contribute in terms of our labor and then contributing all of that in terms of free labor and being shut out specifically, that means that we deserve something very specific. I don't want to hear nothing about, it's funny, 2-3 years ago, I didn't hear anything about xenophobia. All of a sudden, you cannot mention racism. You cannot mention anti-blackness. You cannot have a conversation about what it means to be African American without including everybody in the country that has brown skin. And I'm here to say no. You do not have the same claim. Now, I support your right to put together a claim of your own. I support your right to put together a claim that is best for you and your community. But you can no longer piggyback on my claim. We're not doing that no more. You got to build your own claim. You can't say this is the new black. There is no new black. There is no new African American. Gay ain't the new black. Immigrant ain't the new black. The undocumented ain't the new black. Caribbean, there is no new black. We got to settle this stuff first. This is some unfinished business in America that we got to settle. And I can't deal with nothing else until we settle this. So excuse me while I handle my business. Excuse me while I go over here and try to get lead out of my people's water. Excuse me while I go over here and try to get hookworm out of the backyard. I don't have time for this right now. And you have not been in the forefront with me. Listen, we have to renegotiate. I don't know what y'all thinking, but we have to renegotiate. People say, well, Yvette, aren't you concerned about not having solidarity? Listen, I'm a citizen in this country. My people have died in this country. If you want to have solidarity, you got to come to me. I ain't got to come to you. I ain't got to be concerned about you. I'm the priority minority. And if you don't understand that, and if you do not respect that, I don't know what kind of conversation we gonna have. And so let me just go on to something else. Let me just, and I appreciate the updating of the story. But what I'm telling you, and what I keep trying to tell everyone, and this mayor, what we have to tell him, and you can tweet and tell him, do whatever but this lean-in stuff you're doing with everybody who's not white, that's not enough. But what you see, what happens, everybody says, oh, Yvette, ain't nothing we can do. The white man gonna do X, Y, and Z, and the white man gonna do, ain't nothing we can do. There is something we can do. Just that little thing right there, change that story. We can do something. The Breaking Brown family, we are doing things. Don't let these people, these do-for-selfers, tell you what's not possible. Because really the only thing they're telling you is that they never tried. You never tried, and that's why you don't know. You never got involved in politics, and so you don't know what is possible through politics, but you're telling us it's not possible, which makes me think that you work for white supremacy. Which makes me wonder who you're working for and in behalf of. Are you working on behalf of an entire community, or are you working on behalf of just yourself and enriching yourself? This is my problem. Now listen. This is the kind of work that has to be done. And I told the reporter, I said, I know you didn't get a chance to read the book, but you got to read the book. I know you didn't have the opportunity to read the book, but you got to read the book. That's what I said, because it has to happen. And it has to happen for a very, 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 very specific reason. And this is the reporter right here. I'm sure a very nice person, and I want you to know that I appreciate you. I want her to know I appreciate her. And I'm happy she got that story right. But we should be doing this everywhere we are. We should be watching our local stories, and we should follow everybody. Most places have three or four local news stations. Follow those people. And when they get something wrong, you correct them. Do you really think those Tea Partiers, when they get something wrong, they don't correct them? Do you really think they don't go at them? Look, we don't have media. So part of the thing that happens when you don't have media is that you have to correct media. You have to get in there and play that game and fight that war. It ain't pretty. It's not going to get you $1 million. It's not going to get your kid $1 million. But it allows us to own our story. And when you own your story, hear me, please. When you own your story, you can advocate for your story. And we have to tell people like this reporter, listen, you don't get to go to FAMU or Florida A&M or wherever you went. You don't get to ride on the backs of slaves. You don't get to do all that and then get this story wrong. I understand that people gave you sound bites. That's not good enough. You should be reading this book anyway. You should be reading the footnotes anyway. You should know more than this anyway. And we have to start calling out people, not just based on what they know, but what they don't know. You're going to start getting called out from us because of what you don't know that you should know. And not just what you should know as a reporter, but what you have to know and what you should know as an African American who is concerned about other African Americans. This is important. This is essential. You have to be on the media. I'm not saying you can necessarily control what that fraud Joy Reid says all the time, even though you should engage her on Twitter. You should engage her everywhere that she at. And I'm going to tell you something else. You should never engage in any kind of thing that will put you at risk in any kind of way. You should never do that. You should never ever do that. You should never engage in anything that makes anybody feel threatened in any kind of way. But you should know what these people look like. We got to start knowing what our representatives and what the reporters look like, so we can ask them at the grocery store. You know what? I saw that story you did, and that was real messed up. That was a real ahistorical thing you did, and you need to go back and fix that. These people can walk around and do this kind of stuff. Now, she was fine. She fixed hers. She said, I was wrong. I'll fix it. A lot of other people will be willing to fix it if we challenge them on it. You have to challenge people based on what they don't know. You have to bring them into the fold. But that means you have to know. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. You have to know. And this is holding people accountable for what they know and what they don't know. This is part of what it means to be a citizen. And I'm sorry for people who don't understand. This is part of what it means to have a solution. People say, well, I don't see no solution. Nah, the solution that you want from me, and it's time to grow up, because the solution that a lot of black people want from me is, how can I become a millionaire tomorrow? Are you serious? How can I become a millionaire? Yvette, well, that's not a solution. No, I gave you some stuff to do. What you mean? Well, I mean, that's not a solution for how I get out of here. No, you're trying to get out of here real quick. And what you don't realize is that one lifetime is not enough to do it. Listen, let me show you something. Part of the reason we have to do this, is because America, I've said this before, runs on black failure. And part of the reason it can run on black failure is because we never make a challenge of what we see in the media, which means that propaganda is used against us again and again and again without challenge. We don't know enough to challenge. We don't say enough to challenge. And that's what happens. So there's a good book. People say, what's the Breaking Brown reading? Here's another good book. We shared The Color of Law. How Propaganda Works by Jason Stanley. Now, if you want to get a sense, let me just bring this up a little bit bigger. If you want to get a sense about this book, he has an interview on the New Books Network as well, where he discusses propaganda and where he discusses what propaganda looks like. And he discusses the sort of way we get into this thing where we don't really it's not a matter of we don't care about truth anymore. It's a matter of well, we start operating on belief. Well, what do you mean, Yvette? What do you mean we start operating on belief? Well, let me show you something, and I'll put this image back up for those of you who haven't. I'll put it back up in a second. I want to show you a couple of very important images if you haven't seen them before. Now, this one right here is President Bill Clinton signing the welfare reform, and he's looking at these black women. This is going to be a new beginning, and you're going to have jobs. You're going to be able to take care of yourself and your family and your children and all this stuff. And what you find is that woman, I think the one in the green shirt right there, she died poor. Even though she worked and tried to work and did all kinds of stuff, she died poor and she didn't have her medicine, and it was horrible. But Bill Clinton don't care. He don't care. Why he care about you? He's using propaganda. So what he does, so what they do in terms of propaganda is that they kind of connect us to something. They kind of misuse our values, or they use our ideals against us. So they know we want black empowerment. They know we want to be in charge of our communities, and we want to be in charge of our lives, and we want to have autonomy, and we want to work. And so they say, well, here's your path to work. It's welfare reform. But if you don't look at the details of welfare reform, you don't realize that it's not reform, that you're just gutting the thing that's supposed to help us. See, they use our ideals against us. Let me show you, see if I have this other picture. If I can, I'll find it for you. But this is Nancy Reagan with the Just Say No campaign. Right? Surrounded by beautiful little black babies. Beautiful black babies. Surrounded by beautiful black babies. Now, what you might say to me, well, Yvette, I don't understand. I don't understand what you're saying exactly, because these kids, she told them to just say no. Well, part of just say no was they had all these, they said, well, we're going to say you cannot, around schools is a drug-free zone. So you can't sell drugs around schools. And that's going to have a harsher penalty. And what we said was, yeah, that makes sense. Who sells drugs around schools? We should have a harsher penalty for selling drugs around school. You're right, Nancy Reagan. Hold on. Wait a minute. When we talk about using our ideals against us, what they used against us was the fact that we are family-oriented people. We want to see the best for our kids. So we said, yes, that makes sense. But when you think about it, especially in urban communities, schools are everywhere. So that makes everywhere a drug-free zone. That means everybody who gets caught with drugs or selling drugs is going to do a longer stint in prison, which means that you're going to take a bunch of black men who have been denied opportunity to jail. Right? So that actually destabilizes our community as opposed to stabilizes our community. And it's not just about drug-free zones, because a lot of people who don't have any kids in school or whatever live in that area because there are schools everywhere. We don't make the connection. Just like we haven't made the connection, like I said, we'll talk about this later about Black Panther. When I think of Black Panther, I think about the Black Panther Party. But now y'all want me to think about an African in Wakanda who has $1 trillion, and that's going to now be my connection to Black Panther. That's a problem. That's a problem. And we're going to talk about that very soon. We're going to talk about that very soon. And don't let's not forget, black people in this country were not the ones bringing drugs here. Nancy Reagan talking about just say no. Iran-Contra. Y'all redlined us, zoned us out, didn't give us these, even when we got perfect credit, and then even when you gave us and said you can build a home because it wasn't insured, you put us in a community. You put us in a community that had liquor stores, and then you brought in Iran-Contra, and you brought in cocaine and crack in that community to destroy us. And then, that's what you did. Iran-Contra, redlining, killing us with poisons. It's a wonder. Like, if you are African American right now and you woke up this morning, you should be proud. People say that's depressing. Do you understand that we're not supposed to be here? These people have planned to decimate us. Blaming us for cocaine when you brought it here. This kind of Iran-Contra never could have happened without the United States government at the very least taking a blind eye. It never could have happened. You put us over here. You put all these. When we got a house, we couldn't get it insured and it was expensive, so it turned into a slum. And then you zoned it for industrial use. You put poisons on the corner where we get asthma and get cancer. And then you brought in crack and drugs and you zoned it for liquor stores. And you blamed us for having a culture of poverty. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. All of you ought to be ashamed of yourselves. And if you are a white person right now and you're watching this and you are not ashamed of what your people have done to us, then I question your integrity. I question your morality. You are part of the problem, and don't you ever think otherwise. And we went, ladies and gentlemen. We went from social justice to law and order. We went from social justice to law and order. That was the propaganda, to go from what Martin Luther King preached for, social justice, to law and order. And we said, yeah, we want law and order too. But law and order wasn't used to protect our communities. It was used to pull all the men out of the community and destabilize our communities. And you know who was left? The punks. I'm just going to say it. All the men who say, I'm not going to snitch, I'm going to stand with, they gone, they in jail. You know who's left? You know who's left? The punks. The ones who snitched on everybody. They the ones in the community. The ones who told on everybody even though they was involved in all the stuff. They're left in the community. Listen, let me show you how slick propaganda is. Let me show you how slick it is. You will have, one of the things that I have come in contact with on this show all the time is I have people in the comments who say, Yvette, you must be crazy. You act like the white man your daddy. He your white daddy. You want government to come save you. You want your white daddy to come save you. Understand that anybody who says that to you is a white supremacist. And here's why. Every other group, from agribusiness to Wall Street to Tea Party to DACA people, everybody goes to the government to get what they want. It's not a white person. It's not a white daddy. It's the government. We pay taxes. We're citizens. We're supposed to be able to go to the government for redress. We're supposed to be able to go to the government to get what we need. That's what it's for citizens. Anybody who tells you that you can't do that is a white supremacist and should be questioned and should not be followed. Because they're telling us that we cannot do what every other community does. So why are you doing that? Why are you telling black people, African Americans, descendants of slaves, that we cannot go to our government when we have to pay taxes, when the IRS will garnish us and do everything else? You're telling me that I can't go to my government, but everybody else can go. You are a white supremacist and you are suspect. Because you are trying to keep my people out of this funnel of money. Because the government ain't nothing but a funnel of money. If it ain't nothing else, it's a funnel of money. It's a military and a funnel of money. But you're telling my people that the government is a white daddy. Now I want you to be clear on one thing. The government is not a white daddy. But the government is a reason that your daddy is in prison. Let me say that one more time. The government is not a white daddy, but it is the reason that your daddy's in prison. It chooses winners and losers, and it has chosen black people as losers. It chooses who gets to go to jail for years and years and years for marijuana, which is just a plant. Who goes for non-violent offenses. That is what your government has done to your people. But you black entrepreneur son of a, have told black people that they cannot go to government and say you are wrong for this and you owe us for this. You are a white supremacist. You are a problem and you should be excommunicated because you have put us in a position that we feel that we cannot even call upon the government that we pay taxes to like everybody else does. Everybody else does it. And it's funny to me. It is very funny to me that these entrepreneurs, these black capitalists never call up on, they never say the stock market is a white daddy. Even though I mean, what's the difference? It's white capital doing its thing. But they say the government. So you want us to abdicate our responsibility as citizens and get involved in this crapshoot. Turning down government money or refusing to advocate for government money. And you're calling that black empowerment. I'm telling you that's propaganda. That is propaganda based. Remember what I said about remember what we said. Let me put this book up again. If you get a chance to read this book, please go read it. Remember what we said about propaganda? It's our ideals being used against us. So we have an ideal of empowerment. We have an ideal that we want to take care of ourselves. So they use that ideal and says, well, if you want to take care of yourself, you can't depend on the white man. Well, wait a minute. What white man you talking about? Well, the government is the white man. It's white, ain't it? Oh, you right. The government is white. I can't depend on the government. You right. That's my white daddy. You're a moron. Anybody who says that to you is a moron. And people say, well, Yvette, you know what? They do tell black men if a woman is getting welfare that she can't have him in the house. And what you need to be advocating is for that rule to be changed. You need to be advocating that your government not split up families because a family needs extra money. That's what you need to be advocating. But you cannot advocate that we have to walk away from government, a government that owes us a bunch of money for not only free labor, but because of how they shut us out. You cannot advocate that we can never go to the government for anything when everybody else goes. You are either a moron or you're working from somebody that we don't like to talk about you working for. In the richest country in the world, everybody goes to government. And in a government that chooses winners and losers, you're telling me to opt out. This government, through regulation and policy, chooses who wins and who loses. And you're telling me to opt out and just not go. Because what you're telling me, see, listen, there are certain paths that we should be trying to go through, right? Reparations is one path. Regulation to fix infrastructure through government is another path. We have a lot of paths that we should be going through. But black people and these black capitalist entrepreneurs will tell you, don't follow that path, just do it yourself. You're basically blocking off a path for me. You're blocking off one of my options, which means to me, who do you work for? Do you work for them alphabet boys? What are you saying this for? This doesn't make any sense. So, it is propaganda. One of the biggest propagandas, and I've said this before, one of the biggest ways that you can see is propaganda is this handout thing. I don't need a handout. I ain't gonna ask the government for nothing. I'm gonna figure this out myself. You 2 nickels away from a quarter talking about you gonna figure something out. Even millionaires don't say that. Do you see all these millionaires and people who build jets and stuff on Capitol Hill? Because they're not gonna figure it out either. Everybody wants to get the money that the government got. We're the ones who deserve it, and you somewhat talking about that you don't need it. That this this handout propaganda is another part of the problem that we're faced with. It is just propaganda to make you walk away from your justice claim. Everybody else can go get theirs. The Holocaust didn't happen in this country, but Jewish people got paid. But they want you to walk away. And you follow this idiot right here who hasn't read a book in the last 18 years who wants to walk away too. I have to ask you, what's wrong with you? So I'm not going to try to take too long tonight, this evening. But I want to, before I go to the calls, I want to ask you a question. Or I want to just put something to you. And I want you to understand it. One of the things, when you talk about, well, Yvette, why don't these people believe what you're talking about? Why don't they understand? Belief makes knowledge inaccessible. And that's in this book. Let me say it again. Belief makes knowledge inaccessible. So what you have is a bunch of people, in terms of these black empowerment gurus and whatever they call themselves, who believe a certain thing about themselves that is what they call them. It's a flawed social identity. And even if you can't buy the book, if you go to the New Books Network, there's a great interview by Jason Stanley. Go to the New Books Network, just type in New Books Network, how propaganda works, and the interview will come up. And he talks about this idea of a flawed social identity. So you have this belief that I can do anything. I'm the black Superman. I'm the Black Panther. And so I don't need government. And so what you have is this flawed identity that plays into this idea that you don't need government, that gets in the way of progress for an entire community. That's what you have. You have this belief, I can do it. I can go to Ghana or somewhere in Africa and do business and make this the model for everybody else. It's a flawed social identity. I can do it. I'm from Wakanda. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what the Black Panther did, and I'm going to bring some stuff together and... What? Are you okay? That's a flawed social identity. And so the rich think they deserve it, which is a flawed social identity, because most of them inherited it. Even the writer of this book had 2 parents who were like political theorists. What you think he gonna be? What do we talk about? Taking 3 generations to build a career? And where were our people 3 generations ago? Slavery and sharecropping. And who owes us for that? Because even when we did like do our best and get ourselves together, they still shut us out. Who owes us for that? But these people who you listen to, these black capitalists, these black entrepreneurs, so no. Don't blame the people who did it. Blame yourself. And these people have to be excommunicated unless they're willing to understand what I'm saying in terms of the fact that there is no black entrepreneur without a black politics. If they want to get on board with that, then we can talk. Then we can have a conversation. I don't want to shut anybody out, but you have to get on board with this, and you have to start reading. And you can't talk to me about somebody like an Elon Musk and say, well, Elon Musk is, did you see what Elon Musk did? He had people going up in the air. Of course he did. You know how many millions of dollars that the United States government gave him? Do you know? Just go look it up. Go Google Elon Musk and how much money he got from the government. They don't call it a handout. They take whatever they get, and we have to be the same way, because that's how you get money. There's no other way around it. I don't know what y'all think y'all doing. So we have to ask ourselves, well, who gets to do like this political stuff and take political action? And what does political action mean? Well, here's the thing. Knowledge is sufficient for political action. If you want to have political action, you have to have knowledge. That's how this has to work. Belief is not sufficient for political action. Belief is not enough. I don't care what you believe. You got to come show me some work. You got to come show me either some data, or you got to come show me like an article which shows this is not data yet because it just happened last week, Yvette, but I have some information. Knowledge precedes political work and political action. Your fantasy, your myth, your belief does not precede anything. It is not sufficient for political action. And what you believe about yourself in terms of your misplaced assessment is your own insecurity. And I will tell you that you need a therapist. But that has nothing to do with what we need to do as a people. The fact that you haven't read a political book or the essential political books is not my problem. But you should be removed from any leadership position in the black community. And another thing that you cannot do, black people, let me just say this before I get on I'm on my soapbox, I'm sorry. You cannot have a person who says at one moment they're talking to you and they're loving everything. Oh, I'm doing this for black, I'm doing it. And then when you try to hold them accountable, they say, I am not a political leader. Black people, that is not good enough. You can't, if you're going to take the good, you have to take the good and the bad. Because what we have to, listen, we got to start interpreting these things. When somebody says, I'm not a political leader, what they're really saying is that I don't want this responsibility. I don't want this responsibility. I don't want it. I decide I don't want it. And if you cannot take the criticisms of black people, how are you going to take the criticisms of white supremacy? White supremacy will put a bullet in you. We've seen that. If you cannot take that and deal with the consequences of that and face that head on and know that your life is nothing in comparison to a whole community, how should the black community pull you into the fold? You have said you do not want that responsibility. What I'm telling you, black people, is that now is too serious a time for us to have people at the forefront who do not want the responsibility of being a black leader, because that's just what it is. And you want all the good that comes. You cannot want all the good that comes from it, but not want the responsibility of it. The two go hand in hand. And in terms of everything, in terms of life, our lives, my life, your life, my life, your life, is not worth anything in terms of the life of this entire community. It's not. It's just not. And I don't think, as African Americans, I'm not talking about white leaders. As African Americans, we cannot have people sitting in the position of leadership who are not willing to do what King did and what Malcolm X did. You cannot be a leader of a community that is this marginalized and not be willing to do that. And not be willing to be that. You are not prepared to be a leader because you are too concerned about your own life and your own happiness and your own security. You are not fit. And it's time to start telling people you are not fit. to be in this position for these people and give them what they need. This life is short. Martin Luther King said longevity has its place, but he knew it wasn't for him. And I think every black leader who wants to call themselves and be in this position needs to know it might not be for you, because they could come for you any minute. I'm just doing YouTube, and I don't think they're coming for me, but I understand that some could go viral, it could catapult, and they might. I'm not going to then get on YouTube and say I'm not a black leader. No, I am. I signed up for that. So if you're going to come, you're going to just come. And if I can't make it, then I can't make it. That's just what it is. I've had a good life. I'm fine. It just is what it is. And if you're talking to somebody who calls them a leader, who calls themselves a leader and can't say that, then you're talking to the wrong person. So now it's time for a call to action. The problem, black people, isn't just something that happened. The problem is that we don't know enough and we don't do enough. Just like this person I just talked about, she didn't know enough. You have to hold your legislators accountable. You have to hold your journalists accountable. You have to demand that somebody answer for this redlining. I have this book, and this book is real, this book is true, and it shows me what you've done to me. Now, what are you going to do about it? This was done to me by government. So what are you going to do about what was done to me? What are you going to do about this redlining? What are you going to do about this zoning? What are you going to do about these deeds that cast me out? This is something that we have to demand that our journalists cover, and that our people, our legislators answer for. That is the call to action. That is what we have to do. We don't have, listen, we know we don't have media, but you have media that you can call accountable, that you can hold accountable. And we have to listen. This is why political education, and everybody says, well, you talk political education, but what about this? What about that? Political education is so important because you don't have a foundation to hold anybody accountable without political education. Like, you don't know enough. And we got a lot of people talking who just don't know enough. So this is your call to action. If you want a solution, this is one of them. This is a solution in terms of what you have to do. This is what happened. Memorize this stuff in the color of law. And when you go places, when you engage, whether you go to a town hall, whether you at the grocery store, or whether you're tweeting, because Twitter has given us access to people that we wouldn't normally have access to. I'm back in Georgia now. I wouldn't have access to that reporter in Louisville. Twitter gives me that. So you have to use that not just to follow people, but engage people and challenge them. You can create your own firestorm within your community. And we have to start doing that. So, I always go too long. But I'm going to take a moment. Give me about 3 minutes, and I'm going to try to get to the phones. And I want to hear what you all have to say about everything that happened, everything that was said. And, we're gonna have a conversation about all of this. So I'm going to take a quick break. Give me like 2 minutes to get the phones up, and then we're going to have a conversation. Breaking Brown family, I see y'all are on the lines. And before I go on, I have another call to action. I know I asked a lot of people, but this is Greg Fisher, the mayor of Louisville. This is his Twitter account, and I would appreciate it if you would tweet him and say, like, listen, we're not with that people of color stuff, and the color of law was not written for people of color. And even this is not something that we're saying. Even Rothstein says that, like the people of color is like a whitewashing or a brown washing of who we are as a community. So I think we should let him know that. But I'm about to go to the calls. I'm about to go to the calls right now. I know some of you are on the line. So 270, I am coming to you right now. I'm coming to you, 270. I want you to let me know immediately what's your name and where are you calling from? You there, 270?
Yes.
Okay, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, sis.
Hey.
Hey, sis, this is Herb. I'm calling from Kentucky. How you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
This is Herb. I'm calling from BGKY. How you doing, sis?
Pretty good. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I just want to tell you that I love the show. I appreciate everything you do. And I have my master's degree in sociology. I'm trying to become more politically educated.
Okay. We can help you with that.
And so the question I want to ask is, when dealing with propaganda, can you give us some kind of pointers on how to deal with the data? What is the best way for somebody that's a novice to be able to deal with the data?
What do you mean?
That's all I have to say.
What do you mean? What do you mean deal with the data?
Okay, so whenever we're looking at these numbers, whenever we're looking at redlining, okay, so whenever you're looking at redlining, whenever you're looking at the numbers, how do we deal with that data to be able to make a informed argument with individuals who are against us?
But the data's so clear. Like, that's the thing. Like, the data is so clear. Like, when you read The Color of Law, it points out how we were summarily shut out. There's no ifs, there's no ands, and it points out that we were the only community that was consistently, nobody's saying random Mexicans were consistently shut out over generations. Like, when you read it, it's like there is no argument. So, like, what I'm
No, I understand that. Okay. Sis. I just want to make sure that I'm clear whenever I'm debating others, especially in the community that I live in, where we have a large immigrant population.
Okay.
I don't want it to seem like that I'm against that population, but I want it to be clear that we are a specific group, that these laws were created to benefit. Right?
Okay.
And so I just want to make sure that whenever I'm speaking on this, that I'm very clear to people who don't deal with data daily.
Well, thank you, Carla. I appreciate it. Listen, understand one thing. When I do this show, I'm not concerned about what people think. Like, understand it. Like, because I'm very clear on who I'm advocating for. I'm very clear on what that advocacy means. And I'm very clear on what the data says. Like, this idea that we have to walk on eggshells because somebody might get offended is problematic. Because I'm not saying anything that should offend anybody. When Native Americans tell you who did what to who, when Jewish Americans say the Nazis did that, why would anybody be offended? So why do I have to walk around on eggshells when I say you ain't me? I shouldn't have to. But the reason we do is because our policymakers, our Congress people have done that. And they've gotten all these people in the position of feeling way too comfortable. And this isn't even about race. This is about citizen versus non-citizen. About lineage. I went through some stuff and your people weren't here. It just is what it is. Either you with me or you ain't. And if you don't like me, I'm okay with that. You can walk away. I don't need you. Give me a break. So anyway, I'm coming to the next caller. 313, I'm coming to you. 313, what's your name? Where you calling from? 313?
Hey, what's up, Yvette? This is Nate from Detroit.
What's going on, Nate? What's going on?
Nothing much. Hey, you know what? I've been enjoying the show. You know, I know you great. You know, I know you think you great. Hey, but listen.
Okay.
First, I think we gotta really just admit that we've been duped on a massive level. When you're talking about propaganda, social engineering, pretty much anything on television. Cut the TV off. Go down to your local community office or whatever. Join some town hall. Start communicating with your fellow residents just in your neighborhood. At least you can even start with your family. One of your callers was talking about really discussing things with your family.
Yeah.
We have to accept the fact that this rabbit hole goes very deep. And I know you talk about a lot of good stuff, but you know, as well as I know, you ain't even scratching the surface.
Nah, you're right.
But we got to get our folks just at the level to where you have to accept we've been conquered. We have been beaten, and we're trying to wrangle up as many people as we possibly can and see a little bit of what's going on to get them organized. And then, the rest will follow. And I also want to say this. The whole thing with, I'm not trying to bring up old stuff, but it ties up to what you was talking about. The whole thing with boys, and I know you was listening to the same program that we was all listening to when he had that interview. And if you listen to a lot of those millennials, the millennials got the biggest brunt of this propaganda machine. Yeah. They're the last results of this. Yeah. And not all of them. But just listening to those young fellas, those young people, they're bright, but they only go so far. They get to a point and then they start half-assing because they don't really want to accept the position that we're in. Yeah. Because the thing is, the baby boomers benefited from the affirmative action. The Gen Xers, which is me and yourself, we're the ones that expect all of that slow down on us. And then the millennials come. Right, and then the millennials are coming after us saying, where's our cut? And they kind of pissed that there ain't no cut there. Ain't no cut. And they are just doing all of these mental gymnastics, trying to say everything but call the elephant that's sitting right in the room staring right at you. Yeah. Because this is going to be a hard battle. I agree. And that's the biggest problem that I see, and what scares me is our young folks don't really want to accept where we're actually at because they've been lied to for so long. No, no, thank you, caller. I agree. But
you know what the thing is? I think part of the problem is, and this is people why you going Issa Rae so hard? You just going to, because I think our millennials have been led to believe that I can just be Issa Rae, and I can be kind of quirky and weird and kind of white acting or whatever. Not even just oh my God, I'm so drunk right now. You know what I am? I'm drunk. Go on, I think they have been led to believe that if they be that person, that it kind of erases their blackness. And so what they're going to run up against, and what they are running up against, because, I've said this before on the show, I don't want to ride Lyft, but my people driving Lyft, so what am I going to do? So, the people that I see most often in terms of Lyft, I see a lot of different people, but I've ridden it. I won't ride Ubers. These are that's them, and I think some of them believe something that's not true because nobody in their life has given them history, has given them what this means. And this is a lot of boomers abdicated their responsibility. A lot of Gen Xers like me abdicated responsibilities. So nobody has said, this is what your life is going to be and this is what it's going to look like unless you get up front in terms of fighting it. And we all have to fight it. But yeah, I agree, caller. The next call is coming from 870. 870, what's your name? Where you calling from?
What's up, Yvette?
What's going on?
It's Piers McDonald. All right.
Where you calling from, Piers?
I thought you said, hold on, my bad. My name is Piers. I'm calling out of Arkansas.
Okay, Arkansas. Okay.
Yeah. I know you used to work there with
Congressman Barry of Arkansas. Absolutely.
Yeah, Barry. Yeah, but anyway, I'm calling about the propaganda and everything, and I dealt with the situation on your show last time I called.
What happened?
Now, the propaganda is so strong with black people. It has us fighting against each other. It has us worried about the messenger, but not the message.
Okay.
Now, and it comes in different ways with the messenger, like politically. I announced that I was a conservative.
Okay.
It was a big deal. People calling me Uncle Tom, all this and that. But those same people that's calling me Uncle Tom don't realize I did an hour-long special about how black people deserve reparations. But, you know, I'm a conservative.
Okay.
That does not mean at all. People were saying, how can you be conservative and be a fan of Yvette and be a fan of Tom? Now, that does not mean y'all don't make good points.
Okay.
That does not mean that we can't exchange knowledge. When they kill, the time they killed Malcolm X, when they killed him, when he was about to unite with other people, King and all them.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's what they want us to do, and that's how the propaganda is working. And it's dividing us to this point where we're so lost. Like, once I tell people I vote for Trump, they just turn off their ears. They don't ask why. They don't, you know.
They don't care.
Because, like, I'm a disabled veteran. I depend on the government too. It's just because I'm a conservative does not mean that I say I'm anti-government, completely, you know, no government, all this and that. Like, no. I depend on the government. I'm a disabled vet. So when the government shutdown happened, I got to be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, you know, so like this propaganda, it got us to where we don't even want to listen to one another just because of a label. Now, you know, people don't. So, you know, and that's all I want to say. I'm
gonna tell you the truth, Carla. You wanna know the truth? I don't see how any black person calls themselves a Democrat or Republican. Like, I think that doesn't mean that hold on, understand. I'm not saying that we don't vote. I'm not saying that we don't show up. But I think we show up based on specific interests. And so when somebody says, like, how do you call yourself a Republican? Well, how do you call yourself a Democrat as long as they still got Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton in there? Like, I'm not called, like, I tell you, I don't call myself anything right now. And I certainly don't push other black people outside of the box because of whatever their ideology is. I engage everybody, and I think we got to engage everybody. I'm not going to we have to decide. One of the things that we have to decide is what is going to be on our black agenda. And that has to be a national black agenda, but it also has to be a local black agenda, because hookworm is a problem in Loudons, Alabama, but that's probably not going to be the same problem that black people are experiencing in Oklahoma or Idaho. So we have to basically figure out how to have a black agenda and how to, and that don't have to have nothing to do with whether or not you're Republican or Democrat. And put all them labels aside and get into a room and say, how do we do this? How do we do what is best for black people, descendants of slaves? And that's what I'm about. And I want to thank you, Carla, for calling. I appreciate it, but I appreciate you being a Breaking Brown fan regardless of what your ideology is. I don't get caught up in all that. I don't. It's just the truth. You got a problem with it, you got a problem with it. 757, I'm coming to you. What's your name and where you calling from?
Hey, what's going on, Yvette?
What's going on? What's your name?
I'm calling from Virginia. My name is Odell.
Okay, Odell, what's up? What's on your mind?
Ain't nothing. Just listening to you, drop that knowledge. I want to make a couple of quick points.
Okay.
You said earlier, and I was so on board with this. We are left with a bunch of punks. The black soldiers has either died or in jail.
They died or in jail.
That.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that's not stepping up to the plate. Now, people have to understand that, a controlled fire is not a threat. A wild is a threat.
Uh-oh.
And see, if they keep us controlled, keep us in a barrel, control. The only benefit we can do is keep homeless people warm.
Oh.
It's no threat to the government.
Yeah.
And people have to understand that, it's another thing that you said that I was like, man, I'm glad she said that. When you was like, hey, it is what it is. They may come after me because of everything that I'm doing, but I accept that.
Yeah.
See, people have to understand, it has been proven historically, when you're going after social justice, people may go to jail, people may die, people may, lose their jobs. A lot of different things can happen when you're going after social justice.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and I'm bringing up voice because, it's easy to get along with that because then you're dealing with individualism. You don't have to deal with the collective. You don't have to deal with these realities. Whereas when you had great leaders in the past, it was about social justice.
Yeah.
It was about the collective. So basically what I'm saying, basically on the whole point you made about the punks, okay? To me, that's a great point. That's a great point. When you start dealing with politics, that's when you start separating the men from the boys and the women from the girls.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
See, people don't want to deal with that reality.
You're right.
So I really, I'm happy that you said something about the whole, and I know you're trying to keep it sensitive, just call it punks or whatever. And then I'm glad that you made the point of you understand the consequences of you doing the things that you're doing, and you're willing to accept that. You're not willing to change.
Yeah, it is what it is.
That's all. Yeah, that's all I got to say. I'm just going to highlight this again. A controlled fire is not a threat. A wildfire is.
Thank you, Carla. I appreciate you, bro.
Thank you, Yvette.
I appreciate you.
All right.
Listen, here's the thing, what the caller says about, yes, a lot of the soldiers went to jail. A lot of the people who snitched on the soldiers is still here. That's just the truth. And, it is what it is. I don't get to control what it is. I don't get to be here and take donations. And then when them people come call and say, wait, hold up, I'm not a black leader. I didn't sign up for all that. No, when you signed up for donations about providing information and a political foundation and a political education, you signed up for all that. You signed up for whatever came as a consequence of what you were doing. I understand that I signed up for whatever is the political consequence of what I'm doing right here and right now. I get it. I'm fine with it. I make peace with it. All of that. I'm not going to say when the alphabet boys show up, I'm not a political leader. I don't know why they was, it's hot in here, ain't it? Woo. Whew. No, it's just what it is. It's always been that way, though, for us. I understand it's always been that way for African Americans. So, I want to thank the caller, but it's just true. I'm going to area code 623. 623. Tell me what's your name. Tell me where you're calling from.
Hi, Yvette. This is Kiana. I'm calling from 623.
Hey, what's going on?
Hi. I wanted to call in and make a few quick points and everything. I've called in quite a few times, and I'm a subscriber, and I donate to the Breaking Brown family.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. Thank you, Yvette. I love you. Always showing support. I'm glad you got your tickets to go see Monique. And
I do. Sunday, for those of you who don't know, Sunday.
That's great.
What is that? The first weekend in March, I think. On Sunday at 3 p.m. If you in the Breaking Brown family, I'm going to go be seeing that Monique play. And we can all get together and go have some food if y'all want to go. So I will cover this again before I go. But I'm gonna organize. Hopefully, try to organize if other people are going, and we can go out and I'll buy your appetizer, not your dinner. But go on, Carl. I'm sorry.
That's great. That's what's up. That's what's up. So I'm calling in. Wanted to say I appreciate real content real reporting, real leadership for not only reporting the data, but also fighting for decisions of slaves to have a specific justice claim based on the data and what the data shows. I appreciate the reporter correcting and updating the truth of the book of, Color of Law. She should have came with the facts in the first place. Come with the truth and the truth and nothing but all. Like you, Yvette.
Absolutely.
You always speak the truth. You always get the data. You back it up. You research. You bring your knowledge. You bring the content. You bring the truth. Black people need to know the people that not bring the data, not bringing the truth. That's the problem. And the people like Boyce Watkins, who doesn't bring the truth, do for self, get rich quick schemes, doesn't work. And Boyce doesn't bring the data. The data shows the government giving money and payouts to everybody else, but
not
black
us.
people in
We don't get our money. Yeah.
And we have a specific justice claim for our reparations in America and our specific justice claims and having law and order for our people. We have the highest priority of minorities for the justice claim. Anybody who doesn't agree with that works for the white supremacy. Who happens to be shutting out our community, descendants of slaves. We have that specific justice claim on a local and a national level. We have a justice claim that's Native Black descendants of slaves. The propaganda can be shut down by holding the government and media accountable for, the shutting out black people and the discriminatory of our people, the black descendants of slaves.
Thank you, Carla. I appreciate you, but you're right. You're right. And one of the things...
You're welcome. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. I'll see you coming to the show. You coming to the show on Sunday or the Sunday?
I will try to make it. I'm in 63. I'm in Arizona.
Oh, you in Arizona? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was thinking you in Atlanta. I'm sorry. No problem. I understand. No, that's a long way away.
I'm going to try to make it to something else with the Breaking Bad family. We got to continue to organize, but I'm glad Monique's going to be there in your hometown and doing her stand-up live, and we could definitely support you being there, supporting her and things like that. And I'm going to continue to subscribe and donate.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
But I'm glad you're going to make it to the show.
I'm going to definitely make it, and I'm trying to get, thank you, Carla, I appreciate you. I'm trying to get the Breaking Brown, I'm trying to get some members of Breaking Brown family. If y'all can make it, send me my regular Breaking Brown account ain't working. I got to figure that out. So you can send me an email at ydcarnell@gmail if you're going to make the Monique show. I think it's a play on like the first weekend in March. I'm going to be there Sunday that Sunday, which is the 3rd or the 4th. I can't remember. So if you think about that, if you want to be there, I'll be there. I'm trying to put together something where we can go and have a quick bite to eat or whatever. So that's just that. I'm going to area code 469. I'm coming to you. Tell me what is your name and where you're calling from.
Hey, it's LJ from Dallas. How are you?
What's going on? I'm pretty good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm so glad that you are so committed to coming to us regularly with helping us with our black political education because it's so important.
Thank you.
But before that, I just want to say thank you for, this specific show on propaganda. But I think that we are growing as a family. We are. We're at 41,000 subscribers. And I'm so excited about that because that means that we're cluing people into how important it is to, get our black political education because like you said earlier, this is the foundation of everything. We need to stop making excuses about, we don't have time to read. Don't expect for anybody else to educate us because we've been educated through the system and look at where it's gotten us. It hasn't gotten us really anywhere.
Nowhere.
And a lot of times with propaganda, I think a lot of times we don't even know what propaganda is. So thank you for this specific topic because a lot of times we're fed propaganda and we're oblivious to it. We don't even know we're being fed it.
And we play into it. Not only just oblivious, we become a part of it.
Yes. And so unless we have educated individuals to tell us and say, look at what they're doing to us. Look at what they're aligning our important issues with. then we don't know, oh my gosh, well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. They're trying to, they're trying to hoodwink me.
Yep.
And it's important for leaders like you to be able to do that, because our political education is really just necessary for the foundation of the rest of our existence.
Yeah.
Because we are at the bottom of the totem pole right now as we speak. And it's just, it's really, really sad where we are right now. And I really congratulate you for what you did earlier, I guess today, because I'm sorry, I'm not on Facebook. I try to stay out of the social media world. I really just look at you on Facebook, on YouTube. But there's no correction that's too small for us to overlook. Like, we cannot overlook even the smallest thing, because those small actions are the things that lead us to the substantial change. And think about it. If you were not the one to tell her to correct the inaccuracy that she put out there, think about how many people have consumed her inaccuracy and are not going back to understand what the real story. And you tell us all the time, like, we have to read. We cannot just rely on the things that are in school. And I hope that the girl does feel a certain kind of way, because I would tell you that I probably would be embarrassed as a black person too, going to FAMU and then putting out such an inaccuracy.
Well, because
that's kind of shameful.
I thank you, Carla, but because we don't want to read no more. Like, we don't read. Like, there's some, like, one of the things that I credit is there's some very good books. And I want to thank you for calling in. I want to move on to the next one, but I appreciate you. But there's some very good books, some very good YouTube. They got all kind of podcasts now out, too. Like, that you can understand this stuff. And it is your responsibility. It's not just something you want to do. You go home and watch TV. I know some of y'all can talk about Real Housewives of Atlanta. If you women, if you men, y'all can talk to me all day about stats about basketball or football. Your responsibility is to know this stuff. Forget about all that other stuff if you don't know this stuff. Who are you as a black person if you don't know what your community is and where it came from? You memorizing stats. You ought to be ashamed. Get this stuff together. A lot of this stuff has audio books, and when you read an audio book, if you're going to do it by audio, you got to get your pen ready. You got to write this stuff down, because I have said this again and again, but these wars are not fought necessarily with me. I just give you the information, and I will be wherever you need me to be. But you fight this war in the Kroger, Ralph's checkout line, at the barbershop. It's fought one-on-one. You got to be in it. That's who you got to be. It just is what it is. I'm not telling you that. Unless you just want to, mull around. I'm going to go to the next caller. 617. 617, I'm coming to you. Please tell me what's your name and tell me where you're calling from.
Yvette, Reggie from Boston. How you doing?
What's going on, Reggie? Tell me what's up. What's up tonight?
I just appreciate the work that you and Tone are doing out there with Pastor Cobb. It's very powerful. I appreciate you holding that reporter accountable. I don't think she went far enough, because when she started the article, she says that the author theorizes that the government shut us out.
Yeah, and it's not a theory. It's not a theory. It's just a fact.
Look at the FHA manual. Not to beat up on her. Hopefully this gets
No, you're right. No. Listen, hold on, Reggie. Hold on, Reggie. Don't say not to beat up on her. You can beat up on people. Like, if they wrong, they just wrong. One of the things we do is black people like, well, I don't want to be mean. Why don't I want to be rude? You can. If it's wrong, it's just wrong. And if it's still wrong, I haven't looked at the new article, because when I went there, it was new. But if you go there and you read the color of law and you know what I said, if it's still wrong, then go to there and tweet her and say, fix this, it's still wrong. You can beat up on people. Go ahead, Rich. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. And you're definitely right. We got to hold them accountable. Like I said, she didn't go far enough. But I wanted to kind of answer in the same vein the question that I believe was the first brother that called, when he was asking, what do I do when I'm surrounded by these other groups and I'm wanting to advocate? I think what he and others need to understand, because I can relate, coming from Boston, there's a lot of other, groups and identities, whether it's, immigrants, Asians, or class whites, what have you. But just as African Americans, he really needs to understand that on the local level, you might be the only person that can advocate for our position.
Yeah.
You cannot afford to cut corners and to tiptoe or to walk on eggshells, because those other groups are not going to tiptoe, either. And just to kind of give you an example, just from my personal, life, not brag or anything, but I've been engaging with, different activists in the community. I was asked to testify at the State House to advocate for a bill, and my first question was, what does this got to do with black folks? So I had to go and look at the data and advocate that position. And to your point about how we don't have to be nice, don't be afraid to threaten your politicians with their job, because that's exactly what I did when I went up there. We laid out the data. This is how it affects African Americans. I understood and acknowledged that there's other people in the room, but I'm here to speak for black folks.
Absolutely.
And no one was really dialing in on that before or after my testimony. So he really needs to understand that you might be the only one. Yvette Carnell might not make it to Boston. Antonio might not make it to Alabama or to Milwaukee. You might be the only one. You have to read. You have to get the data, absorb the data, find out what does this have to do with black people, and advocate, that position.
Yeah, and you have to, thank you, Reggie. I appreciate everything you said. And you have to understand, listen, we are a community, regardless of whether I'm there with you. Now, if you send me a message to ydcarnell@gmail.com, because the editor Breaking Brown ain't working right now for some reason. But if you send me an email, you put in there like need data for whatever, I'll work to try to find it for you. But you have to just think that I'm there with you. You can't be like, well, I'm here by myself and these people acting up, these Somalians is on my neck. You can't be, you have to be like, no, this is what it is. This is, and I am in the position I'm in. I'm advocating for my people, and that's what I'm doing. And like there's a Breaking Brown community. You have to actually behave like there's a Breaking Brown community right at your back, even if we're not there. That's what I do. Every time I'm here, every night that I'm here, and wherever I go, that's how I advocate. Whether it's in the grocery store line, at the gas station, wherever I am. Because I know whether or not you're here, I know I have 40,000 subscribers. And that's how I behave when I walk out into the world. So it is what it is. 303, I'm coming to you. 303, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Yvette, how are you? Barkley from Denver.
I'm pretty good. What's going on with you?
Hey, a couple things. So
okay.
I wanted to ask you the question. You put the point out about folks have to step up at the levels that Malcolm and Martin did, right? And I just want us to really, because Breaking Brown is breaking ground around looking at how do we really build a meaningful black agenda moving forward in some tough times for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
How do we reframe it so that it's not about what are we willing to live, what are we willing to die for, but what are we willing to live for? Those are fundamentally different questions. Okay. And you talked about how this isn't going to be done in a single generation. This is multiple generational work, right? And so we have to shift that, because what we do if we get into the narrative around we got to live at the level that King and X did. There's a brand new documentary come out about at the end of the month called The Lost Tapes Malcolm X.
Okay.
On the Smithsonian Channel.
Okay.
And in that documentary, it's very clear we were at a point in the early 60s where the power structures of this country, and you name it all the time, and you said it earlier, that we have to take racism and white supremacy head on. The challenge is that even King and X were running into infighting within the Nation of Islam and within the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And so when we talk about a national black agenda, let alone local black agendas, hell, black folk have been fighting crab in the barrel mentalities for the entire time we've been here. And so I think we've got some work to do to figure out what does it do to have meaningful black agenda at a national level, local connections, and then use the narrative that you're weaving and the great work that you and Tone have done Richard Rothstein is going to be in Denver in early March, on March 5th.
Okay.
And we're trying to have the same conversation because we're in a challenging standpoint.
Great.
You know, Denver does not have the demographics of Louisville, Kentucky, but for all intents and purposes, the city has remained segregated. And as gentrification and displacement has happened, all working class families, especially families of African American and Latino families, have been pushed out of the city. And so the overall flow of capital, we have to figure out some different ways to reorganize that. And I think you presented some ideas. The last thing we've got to figure out is we have historically talked for a while about social justice, but as you are always so quick to point out, and we have not gotten a clue yet, that social justice has to be connected to both political and economic justice.
Yeah.
Right? Because otherwise we get caught up in these false narratives that we think we're going to do things and galvanize more resources, whether that's human capital or financial, than we really have access to.
Yeah.
So just thanks for all the great work you're doing. I look
yeah,
forward
but
to
what's your question? What's your question to me, though, Carla?
How do we reframe your comment around not what are we willing to die for, but what are we willing to live for?
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Carla. I appreciate it. I think here's the thing. When you ask me what you're willing to live for, one of the things that just pops out of my head, and I want to thank the call because there was a lot of good stuff in that call. One of the things that pops out to me and just jumps out to me is that how many people I've had kind of share that thing to me. What's better than that Puffy and Jay-Z? What's better than 1 millionaire or 1 billionaire too? And what's better than all of that, and I've said this before, is a stable black community. So in terms of whether or not, and in some ways I think for me at least, what you're willing to die for and what you're willing to live for are kind of the same thing for me. Right? Like what you're willing to advocate for and live for, a stable black community for me, is the same thing as what you're willing to die for. Because there is no black community in the richest country in the world that is not stable and financially stable. And America has shut us out of that. So for me, that is the answer to that question. But I do think everybody has to kind of think about that and kind of figure that out for themselves, and then launch themselves out into that field of advocacy for your own community. Because if that's not what you're doing, then what are you on the planet for? You're just kind of a waste. So it is what it is. 240, I'm coming to you. What's your name and where you calling from?
How you doing, Sister Yvette? How's everything tonight?
Everything's pretty good, Breaking Brown fam. What's going on with you? What's on your mind? What's your name? Where you calling from?
Okay, this is Roz, and I'm calling from Maryland. I've called in before, and I'm a long-time supporter of yours, and I think you were just spitting hot fire tonight, and I appreciate you.
Okay.
I did definitely being from Maryland. I don't even engage in eating shellfish, but one of the things I definitely wanted to say is that people always saying, well, Yvette needs to get along with this one and that one, and why don't these people get along, and they're our leaders, and they don't get along. No, if you have opposite viewpoints, you're not supposed to just get along and just get along, make people feel better. You're supposed to stand on your square and on your principles. That's what it's all about. So I appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
One of the things I wanted to kind of dealing with propaganda, when we were talking about our sister Monique, who's from Baltimore, Maryland, I wanted to kind of hit people to this. You never hear anybody, most people say, well, this Jerry Seinfeld. I've done a little bit of research on him, and he has a show called Riding in Cars with Coffee. So
I saw that, yeah.
He takes the comedians out in exotic cars, and they go get coffee, and they talk about that comedian's career. So ever since 2006, his show went off the air in 1998. Ever since 2006, this man has amassed a personal wealth since then, of 2006 till now, which is not even 12 years later, let's say 11 years and maybe 2 months, of over $900 million. But nobody that I know thinks that Seinfeld is funny. They don't get his show. It's not quite. But you never hear anybody saying, well, he's not worth over $900 million. He almost made $1 billion and whatever he's doing in the past, 11 11 years and 2 months. So I say let's keep supporting. Let's look at that. That's propaganda. It's us against us. And we're talking negative about anybody. So one thing about crabs in the barrel, crabs are made for the ocean, crabs are made for the bay, but crabs were never supposed to be in a barrel.
Wasn't supposed to be in there. It's an unnatural habitat, Carla, an unnatural habitat.
Yes.
So you're right, Carla. I appreciate you calling in. As always, I'm going to try to get to 2 more calls, Carla. 2 more calls. I know I always have the lines full, but 2 more calls. But yeah, I mean, nobody, like, he does coffee. I think it's called Coffee with Comedians or some stuff. And it's not as funny as the money that comes in for it. I'm not saying that the Seinfeld show was, but I'm just saying, like, what he's been doing since then. But he's been making a lot of money. Nobody said, well, he ain't that funny, and you know, he just got a good negotiation. Like, stop. Like, understand what you. Part of what has to happen is we have to understand what we don't know. And part of what we don't know is how wealth moves, because we ain't never had no wealth. So stop telling Monique and her husband what they need to do, how they need to negotiate, and go back to doing whatever it is you do for a living, because you don't know. I mean, Tone Talks, if you all go to my channel, if you all go to my Facebook page, you see Tone Talks has a new project. Remember the Breaking Brown Family, a TV show, so just go check that out. The link is on my page at deadline.com. So it's funny that we've had him here talking about what it looks like to be in those negotiations, but y'all want to listen to who? Netflix? Y'all don't want to listen to Tone? Y'all don't want to listen to Monique? Y'all want to go listen to Netflix? And who really is taking in white supremacy and just like making it a part of themselves? Everybody who's pretending like they're like the Netflix accounting department. That's a problem. So I'm going to go to 678. Tell me what's your name, where you calling from. You there, 678? I think 678 left. It is what it is. Okay, we're going to go to 973. What's your name, where you calling from?
Hello, Yvette, this is John.
Hey, what's going on? What's going on? Where you calling from?
Hey, not much. This is the first time I ever called your show. Actually, I listened to one show that when you had Tommy Curry on there, talking about a lot of these things as far as the vilification of black men. That was actually a really good show.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I wanted to say, here's the thing. I listen to you. I listen to a lot of different black YouTubers. I listen to all of you for my own personal edification. I agree with some things that you say. I disagree with some things that everybody says. You know what I mean?
All right.
But what I want to say is, I agree with your point in regards to reparations. I do believe that the black community definitely has a legitimate claim for reparations in the United States. But my personal feeling is, I don't know if they're ever going to happen, because this country was built on white supremacy in the first place. And it always seems to be that they are giving reparations to people who don't even have historical claims in this country.
Yeah.
But we keep getting stepped over all the time. I mean, even if you go back to the Reagan with the black farmers, I mean, they closed the door on them. And then you got representatives like Steve King talking about, this call for reparations for the black farmers and their land is reparations for slavery, and we keep getting stuff like that. But I just don't feel. I think that you have a good cause, and the claims you're making are completely legitimate.
Okay.
I'm just not sure that. I am just not sure that that's going to be the answer for us in its totality.
But hold on.
The system in this country to actually compensate us for the injustice. That's
fine. Hold on.
Somehow, at some point, at least as a group, build some type of economic base.
No, hold on. Wait a minute. Hold on, Carla. Hold on. Wait a second. Hold on.
Okay.
Listen. I want you to listen to me very clearly. And I hear what you're saying, and I'm not saying anything bad about you specifically. But what you really have to understand is that the dreamers are basically asking for a certain kind of reparation, right? And they're not even citizens. They're asking for something. Forget asking. They're demanding something from the government. And they have taken up a year. This whole past year has really, for the most part, the only other thing that we've really talked about is this whole Russia thing. But they have taken so much of the air out of the room. So what I'm telling you, there was a time when there were slaves getting hung from trees. Strange fruit. Billie Holiday said it. Strange fruit. There was a time when that was happening. And nobody, I'm sure when you saw slaves getting hung from trees, somebody said, I don't think they're going to ever stop hanging us. These white people is fucked up. I don't think they're going to ever do right by us. What I'm saying is that you advocate, caller. You don't advocate based on what is feasible. You don't advocate based on what you even think is possible right now. You advocate based on what is the best for your community. Those quote unquote, those DACA people, I don't call them dreamers because we are the dreamers. I have a dream speech that came from King that should be inherited by us. They are not the dreamers. We are the dreamers. What I'm telling you though is that we should be advocating based on what is best for us, not based on what we think is politically feasible. We should be advocating based on calling. I want to thank you for calling in, but we should be advocating based on what is based on what is best for our best interest. You do not advocate on what you think that your oppressor is gonna like. Your oppressor ain't gonna like a lot of stuff. It don't matter. We got lynched during a period. It don't matter. We advocate on what is best for us and our politics. Period. That's it. That's all. I'm going to the last caller. This is 443. I'm going to use my last call. What's your name and where you're calling from?
Hey, Yvette, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good.
I love this show. Thank you so much. I just have to say, I've been following, so I follow you and I follow Army on Facebook, and I noticed, was that?
No, I just said okay, that's all I said.
Okay, Yvette, I noticed like a convergence between you calling out propaganda and Army going after white supremacy, specifically the reproduction of it through white women.
Oh, okay.
And it's so fascinating. Like, if you want to talk about calling out so-called black leaders, we got to ask, why does DeRay McKesson get a six-figure income and is named as a leader of a movement, but Darren Fields is shot and tortured in his own car, so his mama can't give him an open casket funeral? And like, we got to talk about how some people can call themselves leaders for Black lives, but misdiagnose and disregard them while they're alive, but use their deaths to buoy their own ideology and garner speaking fees and career options. Like, we have to tackle this new COINTELPRO of these white nonprofits infiltrating grassroots movements. Like, breaking down, this is a community, this is a family, we are a community of many, but this is going to be a movement soon.
Yeah.
And we have to face these people up front right now. We have to take them on right now. There's so much literature. Like, I've read and counterpunch about the article about how the nonprofit, the Beltway, how those people are just, like, they just made a little system just to curtail regional movements.
Yeah.
And I have to say, see, these movements they're neutralizing us through these white women who working as the directors of these nonprofits, reproducing white supremacy as the handmaidens, as the nurturing hand of white supremacy, and use opportunistic and naive black people. Yeah. And I see it in the new movements that we have now. It just upsets me, just how Ferguson turned out, and how so many other on-the-ground things have turned out. And now, because all these groups that started before Black Lives Matter are called Black Lives Matter, the FBI now has an easy gateway to enwrap them in their new surveillance program. I don't know if you heard about it. There's an article.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Yeah, and it makes it that much easier, even though these people had nothing to do with this chapter. And I just feel like, that's a long shot on my part. I'm just gonna say, I feel like it seems like it was too convenient not to be at least thought about or brainstormed to make it happen that way. But yeah, I just want to say, last thing I want to say is, we have to understand, everyone, we are in this moment living through history.
Yeah.
And you have to be sure that when your bones become brittle and your mental faculties start to wane, when they start to speak about the history that you lived through in textbooks and in other mass media, that it reflects the reality that you remember, the one that truly was.
Yep, that's your fight. That's your fight. Thank you, brother. That's your fight. That's your fight. That's your fight. Because the thing that we don't understand collectively is that if we let them take our history and turn us from African American, from native black descendants of slaves into people of color, they co-opt everything that we fought for. They co-opt everything that was taken from us. That's what we're allowing to happen. So one of the things you can do, if somebody says, well, we are people of color, got to sit together. No, there is no people of color. You can be Malaysian, and you can be Chinese, and you can be Indian, and you can be whatever. But and I can be native black, descendant of slaves. There is no people of color. This is not some one grouping situation. And we're going to look back at this when we're 70 or 80 or however long God allows us to live. We're going to look back at this and be proud or be ashamed. So I think at this point in your time, at this point in your life, you should ask yourself, do I want to be proud of what I did at this juncture, or do I want to be ashamed? Because because when you get old and you can't move, you're going to do a lot of thinking, because you can't do a lot of else. You can't do a lot of other things. And you're going to either be proud of how you stood at this moment. This is a pivotal moment in native black descendant of slave history, or you're going to be ashamed. And it just is what it is. And I think you should ask yourself that question. And you should answer that question very specifically. And I think if you say, I want to be proud, I think you should look at the stuff that we're talking about on Breaking Brown and look at how you can deploy that in your everyday life with your family, with the people you run into, and make sure that they understand. I think you can deploy that with your local reporters, with your local legislators. How can you do that? I just moved, so I'm still trying to memorize how my local legislator looks, because I can't remember, because every time. So if I see her somewhere, I know her. Right? So I think that's what has to happen. So Breaking Brown family, once again, I want to thank you all. You can go to donatebrown.com or breakingbrown.com to donate. Please like, please share in your groups. Please have this conversation with everybody that you know. I'd appreciate it. We have to move forward, and we have to purge a lot of people, and the purge is now underway. This is not a horror film, but the purge is now underway. I want to thank you, Breaking Brown family, for showing up at 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and listening to what I have to say. And we're going to talk again soon. It's just what it is.